Hey guys, Liz's Letters here. You may have come across my colorful lettering artwork and video tutorials on Instagram, YouTube, or Pinterest. Or maybe you've taken one of my classes on Skillshare, where I teach fun techniques related to modern calligraphy. Well, if you don't know me already, my name is Alyssa, and you guessed it, this is what I look like. I'm a pretty expressive person, especially when it comes to creating artwork. I love using rainbows and other bold, vibrant color palettes to spread my message of empowerment and self-acceptance. I have a passion for sharing what I've learned over the years with others, and I'm excited to launch my new class on lettering layouts very soon. Now, usually when I upload videos of myself blending colors in lettering, they are super sped up, sometimes even to 100 times the actual speed. Today though, you're in luck because I will be slowing things down to real time so that we can work through the process of blending step by step. What you'll need to follow along with me is at least 1 cup of water. And I'm all about sustainability, so let's avoid using disposable cups. How about a mason jar or a reusable bowl? Next, you'll need a paintbrush or water brush for blending. I'll be using a size 6 round brush by the Pigeon Letters, who just so happens to be the host of this event. You'll want to have some colorful water-based brush pens. If you're new to blending, I'd suggest using no more than 3 colors. I'm using Tombow dual brush pens, which blend beautifully with water. I'll tell you the colors I'm using soon, so stay tuned. For paper, make sure you use something that can handle water. My recommendations are Mix Media Paper or watercolor paper. Any brand should do, although the heavier the paper, the more water you can use. I'll be using my trusted Canson Mix Media Paper, which I use for many of my pieces of artwork. You'll also need a hand towel. And friends, let's not be wasteful by using paper towels. Let's use real towels. So this is the type of colorful blends I'm going to be demonstrating in this video tutorial. I'll be creating the same look on the word artistic here. And here's what the final piece looks like, but I'm getting ahead of myself. To make the base layer for the lettering, on top of which we'll be adding the colors, you'll need a light gray pen. I like to use Tombow N95 or N89 because they're super light. But you could also use a pastel color like 491, which is a very light blue. I've provided a printable worksheet with the word artistic and 2 other words to choose from, which you can trace by taping it to a window and taping the mixed media or watercolor paper on top. Use the light gray or pastel brush pen to trace the letters. If you have a light box or a light pad, like this one here, feel free to use that instead to trace. Or, if you already feel comfortable with your brush lettering technique, you can use my lettering as a reference and draw the letters freehand with your light-colored brush pen. Remember to hold the brush pen at an angle to the table rather than perpendicular to the table, and use more pressure when the pen is moving towards you and less pressure when the pen is moving away from you. This will give you the classic calligraphy look with thick downstrokes and thin upstrokes. So once you've gotten down the base layer of your letters, it's time to move on to the colors. The colors that I'm going to be using are a hot pink 725, a kind of coral pink, a purplish pink fuchsia color, which is 665, a light lavender color, which is kind of like Tombow 620, I'm using 443, a kind of darkish blue, a teal color, and two light green colors. One is 173 and one is kind of like 133. And I'll start off with my 725 hot pink on the letter A. What I'm going to do is just make one downstroke here, and that's all I'm going to need for the oval part of the A. And now I'm going to take Tombow 665, which is that purplish pink fuchsia color, and do the same thing. I'm just going to make one stroke here and maybe clean it up a little bit on the edges. It's important not to use too much ink because we don't want to kind of ruin the paper, eat up the paper. Now I'm going to go into the bottom of the letter A with this lavender color. Notice how I'm essentially just coloring over the light gray, doing my best not to go too far outside of the lines, but at this point it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to go back over it with water and make sure everything is nice and clean. And here I'm taking 443, that dark blue, and going over the top of the R, and again just trying to make sure that I stay pretty much within the light gray area. So now I'm going to take my size 6 round brush and wet the top with some water, and I don't want it to be dripping water, but I want to make sure it does get a fair amount of water in the brush. It's kind of tricky getting the right amount of water at first, but you'll know if you have too much water because the ink will just go everywhere and it'll be too hard to control. So all I'm doing, I'm starting with the hot pink here, and I'm just going over the pink with the paintbrush and pushing it around on the gray of the letter and making sure that my lines are nice and neat and straight. And notice how slow I'm going. This is a time-consuming process. So once I'm done with the pink, I wipe off the tip of the paintbrush with my hand towel and go back in, get some fresh water, and now we're going to go over the purplish pink area. So I'm going to make sure that I cover the entire area that I've put ink down. If I don't do that, if I don't cover the entire area, there might be some kind of weird textures that show up. So I'm going to wet everything that I've put down, and I'm just kind of moving around the color and making sure the edges are nice and straight. Once I'm done with that color, I go in with my paper towel or my hand towel and dry it off so that I don't have any more fuchsia on it. And now we're going to collect a little bit more water on the paintbrush and do the same thing for the lavender area. You'll notice that when I touch the area that was wet with the fuchsia, some of that fuchsia color bleeds into the lavender area. If you want to minimize that, use less water. The less water you use, the more control you have over where the colors go. Every time I finish using a color, I clean off my paintbrush with the hand towel and then wet it again in my cup of water. And now I'm going over the blue area and doing the same thing, making sure that the entire blue area gets nice and wet and the moisture is nice and even. And I'm just pushing around that ink so that it looks nice and pretty to me. It's kind of hard to describe actually what you're doing, but I'm doing my best. And now I'm going to just kind of drag some of this blue ink down with the water, and once I've done that, cleaning off my paintbrush and going back in and getting some more water. And you'll notice here when I touch the area that was already wet with my now clean paintbrush, some of that like fresh water kind of moves into the blue area and pushes the ink to the side. And I like that look, but you may not. So play around with how much water you're using and just kind of experiment. So now I'm going in with that teal color and I'm coloring in the bottom of the R and the top of the T. Now, if you're using Tombow dual brush pens or another kind of drier brush pen, it's okay to go over the color once or twice, maybe 3 times, but if you're using a juicier type of brush pen like Ecolines or Caron markers, I would avoid that, especially on mixed media paper. So try to use just 1 or 2 layers of your color. So now I dipped my paintbrush in water, which you couldn't see, I did it off screen, and I am connecting the area that was already wet, the blue area, to the teal area. And I'm basically just doing the same thing over and over. So here I've taken my 173 green and 133 green, and I'm coloring on top of the bottom of the T and the I. And then I'm going to go in with a clean, wet paintbrush and blend. So now I'm just focusing on the top of the T first, blending the teal area together. If you haven't noticed yet, you will know now, because I'm telling you that I focus on one color at a time. So I'm not working on the light green while I work on the teal. I'm just doing the teal first. Once I've done that, I might bring a little bit of the light green in because I feel like I have some control over the water. There's not too much water. But I don't want the colors to mix so much that it completely blends together and we don't get kind of a nice gradient from teal to green. I want to maintain that gradient. So I clean off my paintbrush of the teal color and wet it in the cup of water. And now I'm going to go over the light green area, starting with the bottom of the letter T. And then I feel like I have a little bit too much water, so I'm just wiping some of it off on the hand towel and going ahead and doing the letter I with a relatively dry brush. Alright, so now it is time to go in with that coral color I mentioned previously. I believe the number is 803, but I'm not 100% sure because the numbers have kind of scratched off a little bit. I don't really need to use that much of some of the colors, like the pink colors. A little bit goes a long way. So you'll notice I'm not covering the entire letter, I'm leaving some of it gray. And this 725 color, I just put a little bit on the bottom of the letter S and then in the middle of the T. And now I'm taking 665, the fuchsia color, and coloring in a little bit of the bottom of the T, leaving a little bit of gray between the pink and the fuchsia. And then I'm taking this blue color and doing the very, very bottom of the T. Looking back at some of the letters I've already done, I'm realizing that I kind of wish that I'd used more colors for some of the letters, so I'm going to go back and change that later. But for now, I'm going to really load up this particular letter T with quite a few colors. So I'm using green at the very top here. I just put some coral in it. And if we use not a lot of water in this letter, I think we're going to be able to create some nice smooth blends without making the colors too muddy. First, I'm going to start with the letter S. So let's wet our paintbrush bristles here. And first I'm going to go over the salmon or coral color. and do the same thing that we've already been doing. So just making sure I get the entire area that I've colored with the brush pen wet. And if I feel as though the color is a little bit too strong, I can always wet the paintbrush again, use more water. Now I'm going over the hot pink area from 725, and I'm going to very, very carefully connect the area of salmon to the area of hot pink after I've already cleaned off my paintbrush. And I use very, very little water on the paintbrush. It's pretty much dry, and I'm just connecting the two areas that were already wet because I want the two areas to maintain their individual colors, keep them nice and vibrant, but I also want there to be a slight blend between those two different hues of pink. And don't worry if you don't get it perfect this first time, it's okay. And you know, sometimes you come up with or you create some really cool blends that you didn't expect because water can be unpredictable, and it's all part of the fun. Remember to clean off your paintbrush when in doubt. Use that hand towel as much as you need. And again, remember to go over the entire area that has color, that you put the color down. And try to also make sure there isn't any gray area showing. So we want to make sure the entire letter is colored in, and try to make your lines as straight and as clean as possible. With a fresh paintbrush or with some fresh water, I'm going to go and I'm going to start in the middle of the letter T here, starting with a hot pink. I'm going to bring it up just a little bit and cover the entire area with water. After I've done that, I'm going to connect it to the fuchsia area. And then clean off my paintbrush with the hand towel. Get some water. And I want to use just a very little bit of water here and blend together the blue and purple area. It ended up looking more purple because there was already a lot of water in the purple area, so that purple moved down into the blue area, but that's okay. All right, so now we're gonna work on the top of the T. And this is gonna be a little bit more tricky because the areas are really the colors are really close together. So I just kind of soaked up a little bit of the dark pink area with a dry brush and then wiped it off on the hand towel. So I'm getting it a little bit drier so the water doesn't all spread so much. And then I went into the green area with a little bit of water, and I'm just very, very carefully blending everything together. My paintbrush is not wet at all. I mean, it is a little wet, but it doesn't have a lot of water on it. And I'm just going over each area a few times, very gently and carefully. Just trying to blend those colors together. And to keep the green at the top from becoming muddy, I'm going to bring up the coral color just a tiny bit right up to where the green starts, but not into the area of green. And then I'm going to work with some water into the area of green with some clean water. And then drying off my brush, I bring the two areas of wetness together, and I make sure that my brush is as dry as it can be when I do this. And I don't go over the entire area that is green. because I want to keep that area nice and vibrant. I only overlap the two areas just a teeny bit. All right, we're in the home stretch here, guys. I'm putting a little bit of blue at the top of the letter I here, and then I'm going to put teal at the bottom. Because the color blue is darker than the teal color that I'm using, I don't need to use quite as much of the blue, and I can use a little bit more teal. Then for the letter C, I'm going to make it mostly green. So I'm using the kind of more bluish green color, which is the 173 at the top of the letter C. Then for the bottom of the letter C, I'm going to use the yellowish green, which is Tombow 133. The rest of the C, I'm going to use my coral color and my hot pink color. I don't put it right up against the green just because I want it to be easier for me to blend. So leave a little bit of that space where there's some gray showing. And now onto the blending. So with a wet, clean paintbrush, I'm slowly going to go over the letter I, making sure the edges are nice and clean and crisp. And this close-up shot is just so much better than the faraway shots. I really regret not having done most of it with the close-up, but at least you get it now, and I can't go back. All right, so now we're gonna blend the light green color into the teal. And again, I'm using less water here. Because the green color is already a light color, I don't want to use too much water because when you use a lot of water, the ink kind of like moves to the edge of the water. It almost like puddles towards the edge of the water, which can be like a cool look, but it makes it more of a pastel color. So I bring the green as close as I can to the edge of the coral without having it touch the coral. Then I cleaned off the paintbrush on the hand towel and got a little bit more water on the tip of the paintbrush or on the bristles. And you can see I am just pushing a tiny bit of the coral into the green and a tiny bit of the green into the coral. Then I dried off my paintbrush on the hand towel and with the dry brush wiped up a little bit of the coral and the green. So they're kind of blending a little bit together, but not too much. And here I'm using a slightly moist brush to kind of mix a little bit of the coral into the green and then blend out the coral and blend together the coral and the pink. At this point, you could pretty much say we're done with the word artistic. All we really need to do is add color to the dots of the eyes. I'm going to use this bluish green color, 173, for this first eye. And then this second eye, I'm going to use the turquoise color. And I am going to go back in and add a little bit more color to a couple places in the letters where I feel like it's just a little bit too monochromatic. So the first place that I want to do that is on the letter I, the first I, the one that's green. And I think I want to add a little bit of the color teal to the top of the downstroke. I started off by moistening the letter just a little bit with my paintbrush with just some clean water. It actually wasn't necessary to do this, and I don't remember what I was thinking at the moment when I did that, but I recorded this a little while ago, so we'll just live with it. So I took the dark blue color and made just a little bit, or added just a little bit of that blue to the top left corner of the letter, and with a slightly wet paintbrush, I go in and just kind of drag some of that color down and around on the letter and do my best to kind of blend it out. And with this, it's really important to make sure that the blend is nice and smooth and that I don't get any harsh edges. And the way that I'm going to do that is by drying off the brush and kind of dragging down some of that blue color. Right now it's going to look teal because it's mixing in with the green. And by using the dry brush, I can make it kind of a smoother blend. And then I just kind of move around the color however I want so that it looks exactly the way I want it. And then I think we are done with that letter. And I'm just kind of smoothing out the edges here. The next letter that I want to add a little bit more color to is R, the letter R. I'm actually going to take this purplish pink color, the fuchsia or number 665, and add just a little teeny bit to the downstroke of the R. And now I have wet my paintbrush in some clean water, and I'm just very, very carefully wetting the entire area where I just added the purple. And I'm going to be bringing down the purple just a little bit along the downstroke. And so first I clean off my paintbrush, and I have kind of now a more dry brush. And what I'm going to do is, with that dry brush, kind of bring some of the water from the purple area, kind of spread it out. But again, I want to be very, very careful, very slow with this, because I don't want to get any harsh edges where it's kind of like the purple just abruptly stops. I want it to be nice and smooth. So I keep cleaning off my paintbrush to make sure there's not any residual purple on it. And I make sure the edges of the letter are nice and clean and smooth. And then I'm just kind of, with a dry brush, picking up any excess purple so it creates a nice smooth gradient from purple to blue. And at this point, I feel satisfied with how the word looks. So we're just going to call it done. I hope you guys had an awesome time creating these colorful blends in your letters, and thank you so much for joining me today.